Let's bring in political analyst Michael Geoghegan to talk about this further. He joins me in Halifax today. Michael, thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we were just listening to Andrew Scheer and him criticizing how the Prime Minister handled things at the G20, saying that he needed to have more of a formal one-on-one. They did have a discussion, and the Prime Minister did say that they did speak, or he did bring up the issue of the two Canadians. Taking a look at what Andrew Scheer is proposing that Canada should do, talking about inspections on Chinese goods, reviews, et cetera, as well as talking about implementing retaliatory tariffs, versus how Trudeau handled things?
Well, it's clear that, in terms of some of the coverage that we see from the G20 summit, Trudeau did come across as looking rather isolated and thus rather weak. So I don't think it was an outstanding G20 summit for Prime Minister Trudeau. And also, given the unreliability of President Trump, that we're in a situation that we're relying on the United States to put pressure on China in terms of releasing the Canadians that are being held by China in retaliation for us holding the Huawei executive. I mean, these are difficult times. We live in a much more autocratic world where, you've got more bullying type personalities leading very major countries. And Canada has to figure out, how do we operate on that stage with, in a sense, more of our elbows out? So I think Scheer raised some good points and some good suggestions in terms of how Canada could have a more robust response to some of these events.
Michael, you mentioned Donald Trump, and if you heard Glenn's story there, he talked about, rather than this being the G20, it was the G2 summit, discussions between the United States and China. He did say that Trump did not bring up the Meng Wanzhou situation. However, Trudeau was feeling confident that he did bring up the issue with regards to the two Canadians who were detained, but there's no official confirmation on that. What does it say, though, that things are sort of being left in the hands of the United States when we're talking about this relationship, the tense relationship that they're having, which we see that things might be sort of loosening up a little bit, but Canada's still getting the brunt?
Well, yeah, I mean, Canada's like the puppy that's getting slapped around on the world stage. And it's kind of brutal to watch. And certainly, when Trump imposed aluminum and other tariffs on Canada, I mean, that was an opportunity for Canada to say to Washington and to Trump, look, if you're going to go down this path, guess what? This situation you put us in the middle of, we're getting out of it. We're going to send that executive back to China, and you guys can deal with this issue. So again, I think there was opportunities both in dealing with the Americans and with the Chinese, where I think we could have had our elbows out a lot more and not just, basically have stood there looking like a victim. And the fact that we're put in this situation by the Americans, it's like, if you're not going to raise this issue with China, guess what? She's going home. And China, if you're not going to return our Canadians, guess what? And you're going to impose these trade actions, we're going to retaliate as well. I think those are the kind of things we need to do. And in so many areas, Canada has deliberately handicapped itself in terms of being able to play different cards. And it just makes us look very, very weak and dependent on, other countries to carry our interests forward, which is a ridiculous situation to be in.
So, Michael, really quickly before I have to let you go, where does Canada go from here then?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has to get a lot more forceful, both in dealing with Trump and with President Xi of China, and basically say, look, we're caught in between this issue, and Trump, if you're not going to raise this issue, fine, you want to extradite her. That's not our problem. We're sending her home, and saying to the Chinese, we're not sending her home until we get our Canadians released, and we should be pursuing our own negotiations in terms of China, and saying, if you're going to slap arbitrary tariffs on us, we're going to retaliate. Do you want to go down that path or don't you? So I think there's a number of things we have to do, but we have to approach it with a much more forceful and aggressive stance than we have today.
All right, Michael Geoghegan, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks a lot for this.
Thank you.